So, welcome to Keeping the Charm in Charm City. Here we have Senator Cory McCray. Super excited to have you on the pod. I want to just give folks a brief introduction of you. I know folks know who you are already. You are constantly all over Baltimore. But Senator Cory McCray is a lifelong Baltimorean, a passionate advocate for working families, and a dedicated public servant. Raised in East Baltimore, McCray's journey from an electrical apprentice to becoming the Maryland state senator embodies the power of perseverance and community-driven leadership. Elected to represent Maryland's 45th district in 2018, he's been a champion for expanding workforce development, advancing voter rights, supporting infrastructure and development projects, and improving labor conditions. McCray is committed to creating equitable economic opportunities and revitalizing Baltimore neighborhoods, and his tireless efforts reflect his deep belief in the potential of Charm City and its residents. He's a father and a husband. And I'd love to introduce you to my friend and the state senator of the 45th Legislative District, Senator Cory McCray. Welcome.
Care first, just thankful for the opportunity. I love the introduction. I got to bring you everywhere that I go. Make sure that I get that same type of energy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So let us know what don't we know about you, and for those who are not aware, also share where that 45th district is. Let's orient folks.
Yeah, but I think you hit it. Like, I'm born and raised in the city. I'm an electrician, went through a 5-year apprenticeship program. I've known my wife, Demetria, since I was 17 years of age. We're raising now 4 kids. I got a Kennedy, Reagan, CJ, and Bryson. And I just got finished speaking at Achievement Academy. But the thing that I ask out of all of our young scholars, I don't care if you're in my house or not in my house, is just I have my expectation high. I think that they can deliver, and I think that they're great. And I hope that I'm always prayerfully making sure that they meet the expectation that's put out there. Just in reference to the boundaries, geographic boundaries of the 45th Legislative District. So we start like to the county line. So like Northern Parkway is the most northern. We bump adjacent to the county. We go as southern as Mount Vernon, Station North, and Hopkins. East is kind of like Hillen and Belvedere, that Huff Road corridor, and then west will be Pulaski Highway. So it's a very, very large swath geographic boundary that we represent. But I do feel like we're doing a good job doing it.
Yes, I can definitely speak to that. So the first question is loaded, and this is a question we ask everyone who comes on the pod. How did you first fall in love with the charm in Charm City?
How did you first fall in love with the charm in Charm City? You know what? First, I'm born and raised here, so like this is all that I kind of know. Baltimore is all that I know. But one of the things that I really, really just, I bet on Baltimore every time because I know we haven't bust yet. And like our time has come. We look at some of the adjacent jurisdictions. We look at Virginia. We look at DC, and they've kind of like hit their margin. They hit their stride. And like, there's only a point in time where we're about to hit our stride, and like, folks are gonna be like, "Man, I wish I took a bet on them." It's like Nvidia; they're gonna be like, "Man, I wish I knew Nvidia was going to split a couple times from that standpoint."
Yes, absolutely. And so I know personally all the work that you've done in Baltimore. But when you think about that and you think about all the different things that you've done in your district, in the area, what's something you're the most proud of when you think about how you've been able to keep the charm in Charm City?
You see, now I didn't get your question, so I haven't looked at all of them. Just to all the viewers, these are not like rigged questions. I'm answering this for the first time, but I just came from speaking to some juniors and seniors at one of our high schools. And the thing that I spoke to them about, I did voting rights. That's very important. 40,000 people had their votes restored. Those that were on parole or probation. Here, I want to say I'm very intentional. So like when I say that this directly benefited my neighborhood, I want to speak to why did this directly benefit my neighborhood. When you look at zip codes in the city of Baltimore, 21210, that's a very economic, in a good condition, supermarkets, things of that nature. The income is very high in that specific thing. They only had 10 people on parole or probation in that entire zip code.
Wow.
Zip code that I represent, 21213, had 937 in the year 2016 when we were pushing this legislation. So you look at that disparity, 10 versus 937, and you look at the concentration of liquor stores, the lack of supermarkets, transportation the way it is, or lack thereof from that standpoint, educational outcomes in certain neighborhoods. Like, that's why that piece of policy was important to me. I talked about minimum wage. Minimum wage when I first stepped foot in the Maryland State Senate in 2019 was $10.10. We've now triggered $15 January 1st of this year, January 1st, 2024. That was one of the first pieces of initiatives that I've led on. expanded library openings, transportation, couple $1 billion injected into our public transportation on this side, the Baltimore region side. The hours of operation for our liquor stores, they're no longer open from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. They're now open from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Every other jurisdiction operates this way. If you're in Baltimore County, Anne Arundel County, Howard County, but now if you go in North Avenue, McElderry Street, Luzerne, Central, you're going to see that they're operating at normal. We normalize things that's not normal. Let's speak to some other things that I talked to these young scholars about. When I was at their school last year, they talked about driver's ed needing to be in our high schools. We did that this year. So every year going forward, $2 million in perpetuity, schools that have a concentration of poverty level of at least 40% or more can partner with a nonprofit, driver's ed, and bring that to that respective high school. Those young scholars did that. They brought the idea to me, and we roll with it. Mr. Thorpe, a swimming instructor that's teaching young scholars how to swim, moving that Black excellence to its best. He was had the swimming program in his home. Before Mr. Thorpe, there was his father that was teaching him. For decades, they have done this. He was looking for a plot of land. We've located him the land at Walther Northern Parkway, right there by the Family Dollar and the apartments. The city owned a couple acres. Not only did we locate him the parcel of land, we also got him a $750,000 appropriation in the state budget this past year. So, when I say I passed over 100 bills, these are not bills the way you say I'm going to put my shoes on today. These are things that impact people's lives, and I can't wait to dig into them as we have this conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And I have to shout out Mr. Thorpe, who taught my husband Khalil how to swim himself and his
My God,
brothers.
my God.
So I love that because that is part of the charm and charm city, right? How many
Mhm.
people of and from Baltimore can speak to being thrown in that pool by Mr. Thorpe, right? So that's
So true.
amazing. And I love that. And you spoke to so many impressive things that you've done in your career, changing the operating hours of those liquor stores, getting driver's ed in the high school for the youth. And I know for myself, I honestly can't even count how many people that I know that have been impacted by, accidents and things of that nature, and how that's impacted their families. And you've always been really consistent about your dedication to the youth. So how, has your personal experience really shaped your vision and your obvious passion for Baltimore's future and its kids and its children?
So I kind of wear Baltimore on my sleeve because I have a different type of learned lived experience. Like I actually caught public transit. I can remember walking to elementary school, but when I hit middle school, I caught two buses in order to go to Winston and Chicopee. When I got to high school, Northern and Fairmont Harford, I caught the public transportation system. My kids are in public school right now, and they catch the public transportation. The ones that are in high school. So like when that bus is late to get to school, I'm immediately calling the administrator. I have multiple vehicles in my house, but at the end of the day, I can go pick my daughters up and take them to school. But there are other young scholars that do not have that luxury, and we should be sensitive to that. And getting them to school on time is very, very important. And it's our responsibility from that standpoint. I talk about the minimum wage. I can remember my mom working 2 or 3 jobs. That's not the way it should be. That is not normal. But a lot of our folks are doing that to sustain from that standpoint. I look at Furley Elementary and Northeast Elementary. I know that when you have the opportunity to learn in a building that is adequate, the way you can meet and match your level of excellence, that is what our young scholars are going to move and match at that excellence. So like when Furley and Northeast come online, there'll be new school buildings, and I know the importance of making sure that we have. The libraries was a safe haven for me. I can remember being in our respective libraries. So when they were only operating at four days a week, when they were operating and closing at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we did something in the state legislature several years ago where we said, you know what, let's keep them open 6 days a week. Let's make sure that they extended hours. The state is going to pay 75%, but the city has to put up their money too, and they pay 25%, and we can then fix and address this issue. Here, I'll dig into one more, and then I'm going to stop talking.
Yeah.
Food insecurity. One of the things that I'm so proud of is like making sure that we have the subsidy to be able to leverage the opportunity at the intersection of Central and and Orleans Street, the new supermarket that's going to come there, Lidl, at some point in time, and being able to work with the Hinton Development Group, being able to work with HABC, being able to work with the city in order to do that is probably one of my honors that where that'll be beneficial even when I'm out of office.
Absolutely. That's critical. I mean, when we think about development in real estate, for us, it's always been more about bricks and sticks, right? It's about the people that live in those properties and those developments. and really building a community, and to not have access to things like fresh, food and, all of these things, having more liquor stores than you do tomatoes and and lettuce, it really impacts the children, especially when you have, vacancy and all those types of things. So I'm all about that, and I'm excited about those projects as well. And so I want to continue to talk about some of those impactful developments that you're working on. But I want to kind of hit on the fact that a lot of people have some really strong opinions about Baltimore, right?
Oh, I
And
thought you
the
were going to
image
say
of
they got opinions about you. I was like, whoa.
we're not jumping nobody over here. I don't know about you. Other than, I mean, I just see you out everywhere, and I
I'm messing
know
with
a
you. I'm
lot of
messing
people
with you.
do.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so folks know who you are in these streets. So a lot of people have those strong opinions about Baltimore, and Baltimore's image, and a lot of times I wonder how many of them have actually gotten on that public transportation, taken the metro. There's a lot of conversation about the red line and what that is, and what that could be. But what I really want to know is, what's something that you think the broader public, whether in Baltimore or perceptions from outside of Baltimore, get wrong about the city? And what do you think is actually the reality?
You know what? So like some of the challenges is that as we are losing population, we're losing tax revenue. So my sole focus is how do I make sure that when we do our census that you can say the 45th district grew and it grew in an equitable way, the way neighborhoods were able to sustain the people that were organically in those respective neighborhoods are still there from that standpoint. So like mine's is how do I create housing? How do I create the amenities that make sure that folks want to stay in communities? People want to live in communities when they have good educational outcomes and they feel safe. So I meet with our commanders on a periodic basis, probably every other week, just to make sure that I'm walking through any type of homicide, non-fatal shooting, or thinking about what does deployment, foot patrol, and things of that nature. I'm always in our schools at least once a week, making sure that our young scholars, like I said, know that they're great, but also making sure that I can see it at a granular level what is going on in our schools and help to address them. I'll give you an example. Over at Gardenville Elementary, right there at Bel Air in Frankfurt, I meet with Dr. S. Come to find out, they had lost a third of their population over at Gardenville Elementary. I immediately went and had a conversation with the principal to understand, like, why is this happening? I didn't realize that Gardenville, a lot of our elementary schools are K through 8. So when those siblings are leaving that school, if they do have a third or fourth grade brother or sister at that school, that parent is probably taking them to the other school because of pick up and drop off. That makes
Mm,
sense to me because I got 4 kids. I was like, I can understand that. The
sure.
one thing that I said was that they had a wait list for pre-K and kindergarten. I was like, well, why don't we make sure that we just up some of the classroom sizes for pre-K and kindergarten? They had to do that before the school board. School board approves that. The piece that I want to lean in on here is I always ask questions, especially as a business owner. I say, what makes me unique? I think that my good service makes me unique, but like what is going to draw people to Gardenville is the question that I asked the principal. And the principal said, we would love to have a dance program. Just like Mr. Thorpe, there's a Macy Whitehead. She runs a thing called the Carroll School of Dance right there on Bel Air Road. My daughter is 17, 15 that went through that program when they were little. So it's right down the street. Perfect marriage. I said, we have a quality dance program right down the street from you. You have a need. Now we just need the funding to do so. We partner with the Family League and we make that piece of it. So, like when we think about the school buildings, it's not just the school buildings, it's also the programmatic opportunities and education that they're getting to learn that's going to distinguish them to say, I want to send my kid to that specific school so that they can thrive and they can be different. And that's piece of it. Public safety, education are main ones, and housing, I'm zeroed in, and I'm going to love to talk about that as we go forward in this conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, on that point, honestly, when you think about, so really, you talk about safety, you talk about the educational systems, a lot of that really leans into how we create and sustain vibrant communities, right? Those are cornerstones to having those. Um, what are some of the most inspiring initiatives or developments in your district right now that you've seen to have the potential or have already lifted those local, neighborhoods and areas?
So I'm super excited about the work that's happening in the 45th district. I'm just going to kind of lay it out in different geographic spaces.
Yeah.
I'll lay out my good stuff and then I'll lay out stuff that we're working on from that piece. I'm super excited about what's going on in the 4x4. It's 4 streets. It's Elmora, Emily, Lindale, and Ravenwood. I've been working on those 4 streets for at least the last 5 years We brought in several nonprofit partners to create home ownership. We brought in St. Ambrose, Habitat for Humanity, Knee High, only on those 4 streets. On those 4 streets are 700 plus homes from that standpoint, and 200 plus are vacant. We've been able to penetrate at least several $1,000,000 just on those 4 streets to address that issue. Then we moved over into Dolly Park. I'm super excited about the potential of Dolly Park, South Clifton Park, Chum, 4x4, and Bel Air Edison, because I think that you build strong neighborhoods off of strong anchors. Morgan has just acquired the Lake Clifton campus. What Dr. Wilson is trying to do is build an auditorium the way he has graduations for the folks that are graduating from the respective institution, but also having retired alumni housing. So he wanted to do alumni housing. That increase in population and foot traffic is then going to indirectly benefit all of those adjacent neighborhoods that I talked to you about. And we did $5 million for Dr. Wilson to be able to secure the land, to be able to make sure that any type of not demo, but like holding on stabilization of the land was actually going to take. And you'll see that that's actually in the state budget as we go forward. Small amounts to make sure that his dream comes to fruition for that respective institution, indirectly benefiting. Harford Road corridor, we have some thriving folks like Tamira and Takesha with like the Cube. We've got Bramble right there by Safeway that just did some apartments for Morgan students. From that standpoint, we got a bookstore, we got coffee shops. Like my Harford Road is thriving, and we put a significant amount of subsidy on Harford Road too. Then when we go down into Lower East Baltimore, I'm super excited about the stuff that's going on in like Johnson Square with the teacher housing. If you go to the 500, 600 block of Biddle Street, we just did a ribbon cutting. You'll see that neighborhood looks so different. Right there across the street here, we're going to be doing a brand new library, brand new football field for St. Francis. Going to be super, and that's regulation because we have not just a local team. St. Francis is known across the nation in reference to the level of sports, specifically on a football. So being able to complement them with that field, and I've got several $1,000,000 into that project specifically, just making sure that it grows. You already know what we're doing at EBDI because you're right there in that footprint with us, doing the hard work, helping us roll our sleeves up from that standpoint. But I'm super excited about Parcel ABAC South that you all are working on. I'm super excited about Parcel B, which is going to be affordable housing coming to a Parcel B. And so like, that's very, very there for me. Where some of my tougher places is more like Fort Worthington. So I'm trying to figure out like what does that look like to bring in intentional developers. I don't need just anybody. I need folks that's going to help me create ownership. That when we talk about subsidy, that they're making sure that they pay that also forward. Like it's a split difference to the people that's going to be living there. And then South Clifton Park, right adjacent to that Dolly Park corridor from that standpoint. I talked to you about what they're doing down in the Somerset footprint with the new library. It's several buildings have just came on, and Dana and Danny are going to move over to the old town as soon as the Blake is built, which will have the supermarket and have some housing from that standpoint. Central Baltimore, right there with Central Baltimore Partnership, we're doing some great work right there in the Greenmount West community and things of that nature. I could go on and on and on, but I'm super excited about the potential and the direction that my district is going on. I think that we have short-term goals and we have long-term goals, but more importantly, we're actually making gains.
Yeah, and I love the intentionality. And so many of those projects have not only a direct impact to those neighborhoods and communities, but I think what you've done on the east side and throughout your district is to set a standard and really a blueprint as as different parts of the city really get some momentum behind them when it comes to development, right? And to think about how to bring in the right developers and partner and come together. And, we talk a lot about development without displacement and collaboration over competition, right? And I think you've done a really great job in your district of creating that type of atmosphere. And I think it's really important, and I try to highlight this a lot because I think people overlook some of the institutions we have in Baltimore. Everyone always wants to talk about Johns Hopkins, which, Johns Hopkins as a university as well as a hospital is world renowned, right? But,
That's a
Morgan
strength. That's an asset.
is an asset, yes, right? We all have our challenges, but it's absolutely an asset. But Morgan State University, right, being an HBCU in your district, you mentioned earlier how it's important that we create and maintain a tax basis, right? How important is it for Morgan as an institution, as well as its students, to really be integrated with Baltimore City, as we think about the future of the city and really trying to, build our residents and keep people here. Like, how important is that at Morgan specifically?
Yep. So we're Eds and Meds town, and the reality is like that is our asset. That is one of our strengths. I think that the port is one of our strengths. I think that the 95, 895, and like the thoroughfares where you can get the places very easily is another asset. But Morgan specifically, when we think about all of the institutions going through COVID and the experiences right now, you'll see that they're like declining enrollment. A lot of our anchor institutions. Morgan is steadily gaining. Morgan is steadily gaining, which is why they keep doing more housing and apartment units for our respective population. Our job is to figure out how do they stay here. So as we are attracting them, as we get them for the 4 years, we want to let them know, like you said, it's charm in Charm City, and we need to make sure that when they talk about service, from that standpoint, that we pick the phone up as elected officials, that we make sure that they have the amenities for them to be successful, the bookstores, the coffee shops, and things of that nature. But like Morgan is such an important asset, and hoping that we can get them below that North Avenue corridor. They're putting together some level of a master plan for that Harford Road area and what could the potential look like at that moment. That was a piece that was lifted in this respective legislative session and working with Dr. Wilson to do that. But the Lake Clifton is just the beginning. Like that's just the start of like the power and the magic that can happen.
Absolutely. And them college kids gonna need some jobs, right? Them
They are
graduates
going to
for those jobs. And we know you've been a super big advocate for job creation and labor rights and all of that. So as we approach, the election season, what policies or political changes do you think are really important for strengthening Baltimore's economy and that workforce?
Yeah. So what I try to do every day is just to raise the bar in reference to what people have as an expectation of an elected official. And I just think that that's moving in a space of excellence. How do you move in a space of excellence? I think that when people call, you call them right back. When people email, you email them right back. You try your best to get to some form of resolution about what the need is. And if you can't get to a resolution, you also are honest about that conversation and letting them know, no, I did try. I was responsive, but unfortunately, this was the outcome. I think that that's why we have apathy within government, because people don't see how they directly benefit from having a specific person in a respective office from that standpoint. And it's our job to change and shift that direction from that piece of it. I think it's important for our young scholars to see people that look like them. When I was coming up, Mayor Smoke was the mayor, Council President Lawrence Bell was the council president, but they had a strong presence in my K through 12 institutions. And I didn't always remember what they were saying, but I knew that they were there, that they care. I tell my young scholars that you have the greatest asset that there is. We can get more money, we can get cars, we can get all these different things, but you cannot get time. So my time is well spent when I'm with you all to make sure that you know that you are excellent and that you are great. But like how folks can kind of shift. I tell folks that I've known my wife Demetria since I was 17. And as soon as Demetria turned 18, she goes out and votes. I didn't really start voting until I was in my mid to late 20s because I didn't know the importance. But if I figured out Cory had went through a 5-year apprenticeship program with the electricians, IBW. He had also had investment properties up and down the Bel Air Road corridor. He's got this family. I gotten across the finish line. Then I started to ask questions like, what was the secret sauce or what is the things that got me across the finish line? I think that it's creating generational wealth. But the second piece of that is public policy and removing the arbitrary barriers that are in front of us, that are placed in front of us intentionally so that we can keep wealth in certain communities versus others. And I always tell folks, if you do not have someone such as yourself, a Khalil here, like at that table, then you know what they're going to do. They're going to make policy decisions to the best of their interests, not to yours. So that's why I say that it's important for folks to get out there, be a participant in the process. Don't just vote. Also know who your elected officials are. And everybody know federal stuff, but the local and state stuff is so important because that is where the rubber meets the road. They are the folks that think about public safety. They're the folks that think about educational outcomes. They're the folks that's making sure that the trash is picked up. I'm going to stop talking because I feel like I talked a lot, but like it's so important, but you have to remove that apathy. And I think you do that by giving good service.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, I talk a lot about local politics because to your point, everyone talks about the national stuff, right? That's what you see on the news and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, what really impacts people on the street whether it is getting your trash cans picked up, but also, real estate, and particularly in Baltimore, because so much is decided locally. If you don't understand what's happening, you get left behind. You miss,
Mm.
you miss it all. And so, with so much conversation around voting and the election and all those things, how do we get people excited and engaged in the process and keep them there as we're, getting into a space and I'll focus on Baltimore, but really in general, where policies are popping up quickly, things are shifting. There's a lot of financial incentives and opportunities that are out there and coming. Like, what do you think that we should be doing to get people more excited and participating locally as well?
What I try to do is I always try to stay in close proximity with the people. And what I do is when my friends want to come and they need support, I also make sure that I'm leveraging that relationship. So I'll give an example of our soon to be next, I'm going speaking into existence, United States Senator Angela Also Brooks. As soon as Angela had came to our neighborhood, I took her to the Great Black Swags Museum. I took her to Roberta's house. I took her to Snack by Nancy. I took her to all of these places that are doing the work on the ground. Khalil, Kira, you'll also speak to, I didn't just take her to the institutions, but like talking to regular people so that she's from Prince George's, understand like what is some of the work done? What are some of the challenges from that piece of it? I just think that elected officials sometimes have such a disconnect from the real work that's going on that it's our job, especially the real ones, to kind of continue to penetrate and make that granular level impression. And that's what I do while whoever's running, especially on these statewide and citywide positions, just making sure that they're paying attention to the people that mean the most to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then with that, talking about that U.S. Senate election, which is such a big deal right now, what impact do you think that specifically has on Baltimore? How important is that race?
It's so important, especially first, just I'm not even going to speak to just the historic piece of it, having the first African American woman coming out of Maryland, because it's so much more bigger than that piece of it. But just in reference to like who controls the Senate, what are some of the dollars? You'll see different capital dollars coming back to the city, and what does that look like from that standpoint? When Governor Hogan was in office, and let's talk about some of the bills that I did. Every big bill that I did, you know what it did? It got vetoed. And it got vetoed by our former governor. When we did voting rights, I talked to you about it, the importance of that piece of it. I talked to you about the 937 that's in 21213 versus the one that's in the fluent communities. It was Angela Also Brooks that was standing beside me to say, hey, that this needed to happen. It was not Larry Hogan. He vetoed the bill. Let's talk about minimum wage. If you don't have that same type of lived experience where your parent was, and this isn't normal, but it's normal for a lot of folks that I know that are working 2 or 3 jobs just to sustain, just to survive. You shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to do that with a good wage. Angela Also Brooks was right there. I still got pictures where she was right there saying, no, we need to do this and we need to move in this direction. Larry Hogan vetoed that. When we wanted to inject the $2 billion because we had the red line money moved from that veto, but knowing that our public transit system, not just failing our young scholars, but our seniors, anybody trying to get to work, we put forward the Transportation Safety Investment Act 3 years ago, and it was Governor Hogan who vetoed that, but it was Angela Also Brooks that was saying, no, this is important from that standpoint. So I get the historic piece of it, and I love the historic piece of it, but I'm just saying in the 10 years where I've been doing the work, the 10 years that I've rolled up my sleeve, somebody's made me work a lot harder in order to get wins for my community, and somebody was there standing by my side to make sure that we were able to get the wins, and I know that for a fact.
I love that. And it's important to have context and to understand, because I don't know that everyone always understands the difference on different roles in government. When you go from local to state, and you have your delegates and your senator, and then your state representatives, but what the difference is between those who are working in the U.S. Senate versus the state Senate. So, like at a high level, can you kind of explain what the difference between those two roles are?
If I could talk money, I'm gonna dig into it, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
like put it where they can get it. So
Yep.
on the local level, you got a $4 billion budget. On the state level, you got a $60 billion budget. On the federal level, you got $1 trillion budget. Like so, like that's a large difference in reference to just the proportion of revenue and resources that's coming back to your respective neighborhoods. But just like when I said I was just at the school, and I'm telling you, they will be able to regurgitate and say exactly what I told them. Your executive is your mayor and your 14 council members and your 15th is your council president. So that's your legislative and executive body. On a state level, and I say these things because don't take it for granted that people actually know. On a
Yeah.
state level, you got your governor, you have two chambers. You have your Maryland House of Delegates, where you have 141 members serving, and then you have your Maryland State Senate, where it's 47 members serving. And then you also have, on a federal level, obviously there's the president, Joe Biden, but I'm going to speak it into existence, Kamala Harris. Super excited about that. But you also have the House of Representatives, and you have two United States senators. Every state has two United States senators, and then you have 435 plus Congress. I think in ours, from a proportion standpoint, I think that we have eight congressional folks in the state of Maryland, but our main congressional folk is Kwesi and Fume for the seventh congressional district. Those folks are arguing for the same transportation and infrastructure, like at a larger scale, because we're talking about $1 trillion+ budget from that standpoint. What happens is once they get to bake the cake on a federal level, that money is passed through to the state level and then it penetrates to the local level. So it's a combination of the state and the local that's making sure that those dollars do what they're supposed to do from that piece of it. Why is something like this important? I talked to you all about the minimum wage being $15. I talked to you all about people on parole or probation being able to have a right to vote. But unfortunately, because the federal government is in such a disarray, minimum wage is still $7.25 in a number of our states from that standpoint. Wow. We can't say that for the state of Maryland. Folks, while we don't have as many people disenfranchised from a right to vote, other states do have people that are disenfranchised, whether they're on parole or probation or for whatever reason that they still don't have the right to vote. So they're trying their best to do the same things that we're modeling and putting the blueprint for Maryland on a national level, which is so important.
So thank you for breaking that down, because a lot of people, sometimes it's hard to really understand all the different roles and how it all intertwines. I've been talking a lot about how much has changed and the impact of having alignment between the city, right, the mayor's office, the mayor's administration, and the state, the governor's office and the governor's administration, right? What does it mean to have the alignment between the city, the state, and the U.S. Senate, kind of all of these different things? What does that mean for Baltimore and Baltimore's growth and Baltimore's potential?
It's good to have friends. Like, it's an easier conversation that you probably had with Khalil than some person out. Like, it's a real good fit. Like, you winning when you have a Democratic governor, you have the two United States senator, all flowing in one direction. What does something like that look like? BCCC got more money this year than they've got in years past. Our K through 12 education, we didn't have to fight for the resources. Governor Moore ensured that we were able to do and fully fund Blueprint this past session. Transportation was a little bit iffy, but we also got there by the time we got out of the respective legislative session. But like those things from a public safety standpoint, like folks had gotten we invested in our young folks, but we also invested in public safety. We didn't do one versus the other. We didn't have those tough choices. We made sure that we moved in the same direction from that piece. So it's a lot better when you have a fearless leader helping to be a quarterback and give the marching orders and say, hey, here's the direction. And sometimes you got to push back. I'm sure that you and Khalil have conversations and say, hey, I think that this might be the direction that we need to go. And then we come out of that room and we all going in that same direction. So yes, we do have good conversations, but it is a lot easier than somebody that's putting roadblocks, barriers, and trying to trip you every time you get a chance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have so much great momentum right now. I think, whatever, as we all elect our local officials and have, folks like you in office, it's important that we also think about what continues to make it that much easier or streamlined, not easier, right? But how can we set everybody up for success, right? And that comes in when you get into that voting booth, right? To be able to open up those doors for conversation and make sure things continue to move smoothly. So you've mentioned this a few times. I can't help but ask about it. So you said you and your wife met when y'all were 17.
17.
Okay, so
She just seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah.
So tell me about that, right? So you guys have been together for a really long time. You have a beautiful family. You're hustling and getting stuff done constantly. Y'all know me and my husband work together quite a bit. And so just tell me about that. Give me something personal about Senator McCray?
Nah, I just think like we watched each other grow when you've known each other for that extensive amount of time. I think that anybody that's been in a long relationship, you know what ticks people off, you know what makes them happy, things of that nature. So it's a lot easier when you get to a certain amount of years because it's like, are you trying to push the triggers that you know gonna get me there? From that standpoint. But just to have someone, she was born and raised in the Oliver community, and just to have someone by your side supporting your endeavors and vice versa. She's a teacher. She's a second, third grade teacher. From that standpoint, someone that sharpens the knife every time that you come when you're kind of down and tried it, like having that nucleus to be able to come back to. And I get that joy. I told you I got 4 kids at 17, 15, 10 and 9, CJ, Bryson, Kennedy, and Reagan. Like, we do this for our children. Like, we do this to make sure that the next generation is in a better position than what we're doing. And I just think about not just my young scholars, but everybody that they're interacting with. I just look at it different. And Kara, so like when Angel Reese come into town, like it ain't just gonna be my daughter going. Like we taking a whole basketball team. So our JV team want to go. When we wanted to take them up to Towson, we want to take them up to Cop. Like that's the level of experience. We just took Kennedy and her group down to the Hippodrome to see like it wasn't Romeo and Juliet, but another spinoff of it from that standpoint. But like that's what it means just to have like that nucleus that kind of makes you better, sharpens that knife, and making sure like when you falling short, like they tell you, they honest, like no, you way there. That's not the space that we moving at.
Yeah.
And it's a real beautiful opportunity to be able to meet that life partner.
Yes, absolutely. So Quill and I, we're pushing on. Now I'm putting myself on the spot. I don't even know why I would do that. 16 years, I think, this year, which is crazy. So it's interesting how obviously that continues to always shift and grow and throw you through a loop every once in a while, right? But also how it influences how we even see what the work that we do every day. And so I love to hear that she's a teacher because it actually, for me, it makes that much more sense, right? When you talk about working in the education system and working with different schools. So I always love to see that, so with that, thank you for sharing because I just, have to ask. But, you know, at the end of the day, where do you see Baltimore in 10 years? Where's
Mm.
Charm City? What does it look like to be in Baltimore in 2034?
Yeah, I see a city with good educational outcomes, the public safety going in the right direction. Our population has increased, which then indirectly means that services are better and possibly tax decreases from that standpoint. But I just see government operating at the standard that it should operate, but more importantly, our neighborhoods thriving no matter where you're living at. Not like some neighborhoods thriving, like all of our neighborhoods thriving and having the short term and long term goals to make sure that it's necessary to sustain that success.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity here and you hit it on the head, right? Really that equitable opportunity to living the way you should in a beautiful city like ours. Um so kind of closing things out, clearly we're learning, he's a family man, right? He's a husband, he's a professional, a senator at that, right? He's an advocate for the youth, a visionary leader. He's a Baltimore native, and he is the Maryland State Senator for the 45th District. Do you have any closing remarks or anything that you want to share or something you didn't get the chance to talk about?
No, I just want to thank you and Khalil just for the work that you all are doing. These are the types of partners that you need in order for Baltimore to meet its success, to meet its opportunity, to meet its victory in that year. And like, I just want to lean in and say, like, if there are folks that are listening, if there are questions that you may have after the show, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm on all social media mechanisms as Cory McCray or Senator McCray. But more importantly, Kira noticed I'm always responsive. So if you shoot me an email, mine is Cory.McCray@senate.state.md.us, but it's also public. So if you Google Cory McCray email address, the one that I answer is going to pop up. I take this work serious. I'm in the business of service and just want to make sure that anybody that is doing business or live in Baltimore are getting the highest level of service, especially if you live in my district.
Absolutely. You know how much we appreciate you. We know you're always an email, a quick phone call, or a text away, and that's something that we really don't take lightly. And that is important, and it gives us the opportunity to do the work that we do. And so we thank you We appreciate you. Thank you for coming on. We'll definitely share your information with folks as they, I'm sure, as all that you have going on over there, they're going to move to the 45th. They want to do work in the 45th.
That's
They
what I
want
want. That's what I
to
want. I'm like collaboration, collaboration, collaboration.
let's make it happen. Thank you so much, Senator McCray. And
Thank you for the opportunity.
absolutely, we'll talk soon.
All right, y'all.